Alright, Alex Perez versus Tatsuro Taira. First of all, we're going to talk about Shayilan Nuerdanbieke versus Melquizael Costa. Who am I going with to win the fight? 50-50, like the poll says right here, but I'm going with Melquizael Costa to win by submission. And I think he can do it in the first round. And why have I picked submission? Well, Shayilan Nuerdanbieke was like a short ball of muscle. He hits very hard. He's very fast. And if you look at him in the post-fight interview, he looks a bit like Michael Chandler. I'm not going to lie, a little bit. Yeah, they're not the same skin colour, but you know what I mean? Like, the high cheekbones, they don't really look too tall. Got a compact physique, lean. Melquizael Costa, his grappling is very strong. The only problem was he gassed himself against a more rangier, a taller guy in Steve Garcia. Taking down taller guys is way harder than these shorter guys. Like getting your legs, getting your hooks in. He was just leaning his back up against the cage. And I think with Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, what he can do differently in this fight is take advantage of shooting for those doubles early. Because when you're very explosive, you've got the chance you're going to get hit with that cross if you don't level change quick enough. But then if he misses and he's being very fast and explosive, looking to close you down with a lot of pressure, he's going to walk into the takedowns, and that's what I see happening. And then I see Shayilan Nuerdanbieke giving away his back. Because really, we don't really see him getting taken down by his opponent. It'll be the opposite. He'll be going for takedowns, which he was good at. But I do believe Costa is a better grappler, and the jiu-jitsu that he has to go with it. If you look at Nuerdanbieke's record, it's a bunch of stat-padded farmers from back in the day. Like, I'm not talking about the UFC record. You'd think he's just going to get a load of knockouts in the UFC, but he hasn't. And I think Costa's the type of guy where he's always looking to get his hooks in. Nuerdanbieke doesn't usually fight with his back near the cage. When he shoots him for the takedown, it'll be near the middle. So he will have the opportunities on the ground to look to get those hooks in and pass his guard and look to get into the back mount position. And then I can just see him taking that neck and submitting him in the first round. Just because of how aggressive Nuerdanbieke is. And if you actually look at his record, he's been submitted quite a lot back in the day by journeymen. But then again, Costa's chin's a bit concerning. Like, Garcia hits hard, but when he puts you down like that, and immediately he like falls down to the ground and the fight's pretty much over, I don't know how good his chin is, because this guy here, again, hits very hard like Garcia. So it's a very 50-50 hard one to pick, but I am going with Costa. Right, this is the definition of if Westin Wilson wins the fight, cut Saragih, because he should not win this fight. The only reason he is actually in here is because a guy pulled out and then he got the opportunity. And I believe he trains, upstate karate with Wonderboy Thompson. Therefore, it's a good reference, isn't it? But he's not that good. The only good thing he is good at jiu-jitsu. And if we see, remember Michelle Olian-Jacek last week or the week before, when he knocked down Kevin Holland and then he wraps up a triangle armbar and then gets the armbar. You have to be careful, because this Saragih, I am going to pick him to do it via first round KO, but I would not be shocked if Wilson, as he knocks him down, because of how aggressive he is, he won't worry about his head positioning. He'll be looking for that finish. He could get caught with a knee bar as they're scrambling down to the ground. Like, look at Westin Wilson against, what was his name? Brito, that's it. He got him in a knee bar in that fight. And although he was getting hit in that position, I can't trust Saragih as well as I can with a Brito to defend against something like that. Just because of how reckless he is. And his ground game don't look too good. Like, Anshul Jubli just laid on top of him. He pretty much had to quit without, like, taking significant damage. He was just trapped. He couldn't really move and he was just finished. So, I swear to God, if Wilson wins the fight, I'm sorry. I know it sounds harsh, but I would cut Saragih, because that's just embarrassing. No, I'm joking, but you know what I mean? Saragih, to me, he's got to knock him out on the feet, and I think he can. Like, the way he can march you down aggressively. Wilson shells up, doesn't move his head. He doesn't look like he's got a great chin. 35 years of age. The damage he took in the last two fights, I think it only makes sense for Saragih to knock him out, but with this sport, I don't even know at this point. Like, you never know. Right, Garrett Armfield versus Brady Hiestand. In a weird way, Hiestand has a very good chance in the fight. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But I'm going with Garrett Armfield by KO. And I think he can do it in the... I'll say second round because Hiestand's chin... What's the word? He can be knocked down. He's quite chinny. But then he can bounce back up to his feet. Good recovery. But the reason I said Hiestand has a chance is the takedowns on this guy. His grappling... It looks very high level and it looks like it's got a lot of potential. Like the things he was doing by taking the back and then slamming his opponent into side control and Ricky Turcios, which you might not think is that impressive considering Ricky Turcios has no takedown defense. But who made it look like he had no takedown defense? This guy here. And against Garrett Armfield, look at that Onama fight. Onama was stronger than Armfield. He was able to get him down to the ground easy. But the difference is, I think Onama's approach to takedowns is sometimes better than Hiestand because Hiestand will keep shooting in double legs. And when you keep doing it, it's quite predictable. And although you can have a good return on investment when you get a double leg, puts yourself straight into the full guard position compared to shooting on a single and working to get that takedown. And you might even end up in side control, or you could end up in full guard from the single leg takedown. I think he doesn't mix it up enough, and I think it's very predictable for someone like Garrett Armfield to read. So I think he's just going to go out there like he's done in the last two fights and apply the pressure. Although you could argue that Armfield last fight, I wouldn't call it a robbery. It was very close, but I did just edge it to Katona. I think Garrett Armfield, with the power and the snappiness of that jab, it's going to cause Brady Hiestand problems because, again, doesn't move his head. It looks like he blocks his far too many punches with his head. And his chin's eventually going to crack because he's been in 2 wars, I believe. Where it was the Guerrero Dana. It wasn't really a war, but it was a bottle job by Dana. Dana was winning that fight. He dropped him. He reversed the position, got a few strikes in the second round. Then third round, he quit. Too tired. And then Hiestand won as like a plus 625 underdog going into the third round, all because his opponent quit. So if you put any money on that, I feel bad for you. But the Fernie Garcia win, again, another guy who's a can. But the Ricky Turcios, that was controversial. But I did see some good things of his striking in that fight. He does very creative things in there. Whether it's the switch stance, like a small switch step into a cross or a jab, or if it's that takedown I mentioned a minute ago. He can do things that look promising, but I just think Garrett Armfield was starting to get into his stride now. They're both young, so it's not a thing I have to worry about. Garrett Armfield, he can defend takedowns, but it didn't look like it against Katona, and it didn't look like it against Onama. But I think that's because of the quality of opponent you're putting in front of him. If you give him a grappler like that who shoots out of range, telegraph takedowns, I think he can stop that. So I think he's going to get that KO in the second round, because I think first round he can survive. He's going to touch him a little bit, not in that way, but he's just going to jab him, get his feel for the range, and then second round pull the trigger and look for that right cross and put him down. Right, Nate Maness versus Jimmy Flick. This one for me is fairly obvious, but again, Jimmy Flick's unpredictable, but I am going to go over KO, and I think he can do it in the second round. The first round for Nate Maness, one thing I've noticed with him, he doesn't really have a high output, and that's probably because his fights end early. First of all, I want to go back to the Tagir Ulanbekov fight. How painful is this? You fight Umar Nurmagomedov, who's undefeated, and he looks very good at the time, promising. And then you have to fight Tagir Ulanbekov, who is nowhere near as good as him, but is a hard guy to fight, especially because he's got that height, type of squeeze. I can't really say the word. Well, I can't remember what the word is, actually. My brain's all over the place. High elbow, deep choke. Jimmy Flick's not got the wrestling to beat Nate Maness. He is a guy where he needs to be on his back, and if he shoots for a double, if he can't get it, he's not going to submit you, because he can submit you off the bottom, but I think opponents don't go there with him, or try not to go there with him, because they know how dangerous it is. And if they are going to try and grapple with him, they make sure to be mounted, a position where it's really hard to get a submission. And I think with Nate Maness, he's going to do a lot of kicking and he's going to stay on the outside, because you'll notice his striking is quite good. He's had to fight guys like Taylor Lapillus, which he did lose by like a body kick. But Jimmy Flick has no durability in him. He really doesn't. So it's all about a submission or nothing. And all of his fights, none of them go to the distance, and I predict it to go here. But I don't think Nate Maness is going to submit him. Although he would have the possibility to do it, this is not worth the risk. But then again, MMA fighters, they can make dumb decisions like looking to grapple. No, like a striker looking to grapple against a wrestler, or a guy who's confident in their grappling coming up against a guy with extremely good jiu-jitsu off their back and then ends up getting submitted. It's not worth doing. So I think Nate Maness has to stay there on the feet, and I think he'll finish him in the second round. I think he'll break him down in the first. Jimmy Flick will pretty much be done, and then second round pretty much just finish him off. A few leg kicks is what I think he'll do, and then look to follow up with like some hooks, back him up against the cage, and it's over. Right, Tagir Ulanbekov versus Joshua Van. I'm going with Tagir Ulanbekov, and not just because there's an of. And I'm going by decision. I was thinking submission at first because I noticed one thing by Joshua Van. When he's striking, he is so fast, but he stays in the pocket for way too long. For example, he'll throw like a 1-2, maybe exit with a hook, but then he'll still be in hook range or like in a grappler's range to get the takedown, which is why, although he showed some good takedown defense in the last fight, you'll also notice he got taken down because he wasn't going in and out. He was staying in the pocket instead of landing a combination, getting back out of range, and then coming back in, because the longer you stay in range with a grappler as good as Ulanbekov, he will shoot in on them legs. And another thing, I don't think Ulanbekov will allow him to bully him with the range, because he throws a lot of front kicks. You'll notice a lot of these like Dagestani fighters are like, I believe he might have Makhachev or Khabib in his corner, probably Makhachev. And they're very good at throwing kicks. Not Khabib, but we know Makhachev really is. And he's got it drilled him as well. Nowhere near Van's level. But that being said, Van doesn't really throw a lot of body kicks to me. A lot of his strikes are leg kicks and really fast boxing. Tagir's more of a, not really a head kicker. He's more of like a jab and a front kick to the body. But not Sean Strickland style, because he'll throw a teep and then he'll look to land that cross. But he doesn't do it Strickland teep, both teep, jab, feint, and walk you down. He doesn't do that. But I believe he is going to be able to take Joshua Van down a few times in the fight. But I think Joshua Van, with a takedown defense, he'll be defending takedowns, and Ulanbekov will be using a lot of energy to get them. But because he's constantly going for the takedowns, Van's not going to have a lot of room to land that many strikes. Therefore, I can see him losing by decision. Right, Adam Fugitt versus what people would call a steroid cheat. But I ain't even going to go there. You know what? You see, Adam Fugitt was an overachiever in terms of beating Yusaku Kinoshita. And I'm trying to think, there is a high chance he can pull this off. But the reason which is swaying me into him losing, and I am going with Josh Quinlan, and I think he can KO him in the second round, is because with Josh Quinlan, the power's still there from the roid. You don't lose power like that. Well, maybe you do. But it doesn't look like Quinlan has. He's had match-made fights which have just been horrible for him. Danny Barlow, which is pretty much the first one to land clean, is going out cold. And Danny Barlow's got that very good southpaw left hand, so I can see why you might think Adam Fugitt could win, because he's got a good left hand as well. Not with as much power as a guy like Danny Barlow, but he does have power. But what's swaying me with Josh Quinlan is, I think he's going to mix up the grappling more. And you could argue that Adam Fugitt has got the grappling and the takedown defense to even prevent that. But that being said, when you actually look at the guy who he came up against, Mike Malott, he didn't look like he had good grappling there because he was the one getting taken down. But I think Josh Quinlan needs to come back more than Adam Fugitt. If he loses, he ain't cut from the UFC. I know he's 35 years of age, but he just seems like one of those guys who's just going to fill in a slot. So I do see why you're picking Fugitt, but I think we're going to see the Quinlan that we saw against Jason Witt. And that feels like it was ages ago. Like, that guy is a can, Witt. Then Waiters just outstriked him with the range. And again here, this guy has a longer range with him, southpaw, a bit taller. He could get caught with that left straight and struggle to land. But I think he will, because he'll also mix in the grappling as well, like going for takedowns. And once he's on the ground, I don't think he'll finish him there, but he's going to do that to try and score points in the round. And then when they get back up to the feet round 2, I can just see him catching Adam Fugitt with a hook as he tries to enter the pocket after he adapts to the range. But again, it's a really hard one to pick, because Fugitt has a very good chance of winning it, just because Josh Quinlan looks like he could be a bit of a fraud. Like, for the hype he had against Witt, the 2 losses don't look good. The Waiters is more concerning than the Barlow because of the power, but it was the way he just got bullied every round by just getting out jabbed pretty much. And I don't think Fugitt can do that, but I think he's a hard opponent. Right, Azu Almabaev versus Jose Johnson. I'm going with Azu Almabaev, and I think he will submit him. It's all about what round will he submit Jose Johnson in. I think he can do it in the first round, but it's all about his approach, how aggressive he starts off. Because he loves throwing a lot of spinning turning kicks, and I wouldn't against Jose Johnson. Knowing him, he's known for his elbows. If you do like a spinning kick and miss, and you've got a guy like Jose Johnson doing spinning elbows, you could end up spinning yourself into a spinning elbow. And I wouldn't want that to happen, because I think Azu Almabaev looks like a guy who's going to be a problem in flyweight. I don't even know if he's ranked, but after this, give him a ranked opponent, please, because Jose Johnson, he's rangier, but even then, Azu Almabaev will make strikers look worse than him at striking. Like, I think he will outstrike Jose Johnson, even though he is the shorter guy. And when I say outstrike him, I mean with like shots to the body, that spinning body kick. Even though it's risky, it's worked. And it feels weird that we're watching a 6-foot guy fight against a guy 5'4" in flyweight. When you see that in the cage, it's going to look very strange. But I think he'll get it done in the first round. Like, I can't trust the guy who got submitted by Damon Blackshear in a twister to defend against a guy who's got extremely strong takedowns. Jose Johnson's way too offensive when he's being taken down, like worrying about getting those elbows on the top of your head. It just seems written in the stars for Azu Almabaev to shoot on that double, wait until Jose Johnson tries to spring back up to his feet and get that rear naked choke. Right, Miles John versus Douglas Silva to Andrade. For me, this will end up being a very boring fight, even if you don't think it will be. But I am going with Miles John to win via decision. Not just because of the age, because for a guy of his age, at that weight class, he is an outlier to the rule. I don't know how he does it. You could argue in the last 5, there is an argument that he only lost to Liren Murphy. And the other 2, you could argue that he won that 29-28. Very good argument to make with round 2 and 3. But with Miles John, the reason why I'm kind of scared to pick him is because he slows down in the 3rd round. We saw more of an improvement in the last fight, but I think he will win the first 2 rounds. One, because Silva Andrade usually looks like he's outstriking his opponent. No, he doesn't look like he's outstriking his opponent, but he actually is by numbers. But numbers don't beat what people actually see with the eye test. And then you've got Miles John, who he throws everything with power, but he's more cautious of when he does it. But because he throws everything pretty much with the power, and it's not a lot of light punches, he will tend to gas quicker. Which is why I think he will win the first 2 rounds, because Silva Andrade doesn't land anything heavy, maybe a few light jabs and a few like touching leg kicks, and then you see Miles John level changing, looking to land that overhand right, which he catches him on the chin with, and like a few hooks, not lead hooks, hooks coming from the rear hand. And they're like the strikes that you remember, which are therefore the most damaging of that round, which then gives Johns the decision, because he will look good in the first 2, and then the 3rd round slow down. And I don't think there'll be any grappling. I don't. Because they're both quite defensive. I don't see a need for them to be shooting unless one of them's hurt. And at the end of the day, they like to strike more, so I don't think they will grapple. But there might be one takedown in the fight, like in the 3rd round by Andrade, when John is gassed. Lucas Almeida versus Timmy Cuamba. I'm going with Cuamba to win via decision. Okay? Cuamba's a guy from what I've seen where he actually likes to grapple even though he's got a lot of power. No, you know what? I don't even think he has got that much power. His power's quite hit or miss, because he's quite patient with his approach. I think the power can come from when he's on the bottom, and we haven't seen it in the UFC, but I've seen it outside of the UFC. For example, he ground and pounded his opponent once, but there isn't like key significant details on the ground in terms of like submissions with this guy. And I don't even think he has submitted an opponent, and if he has, it's only one. And Lucas Almeida, on the other hand, he's coming off a brutal knockout. When he fought Daniel Zellhuber, he was pretty much getting out-grappled. He allows his back to be against the cage too much. And look back at Timothy Cuamba's fight with Boji Okalaji. What's his name? Pronounced it wrong. Yeah, Baloji Oki. He lost that fight, 1-3. Got caught with a few stiff jabs and straights. But Almeida don't really do that. He's a bit reckless and wild. Like swinging hooks, loading up on every strike, but allows himself to get backed up against the cage, like he did against Zellhuber, and sometimes against Philly. And if you have your back up against the cage against a guy like Cuamba, he likes going for takedowns. Like he did it to Oki, though in round 2 it was, where his back was up against the cage and it allowed him to clinch and then work his way down. Yeah, he didn't do any damage in that round really, but there wasn't really much from Oki either. He tried to slow the pace down and it just allowed Cuamba to be on top, and I think that's what we'll see in this fight here. Almeida backing up against the cage. They end up in the clinch, like where they can tie up. Almeida's looking to be like really aggressive, cutting him open with elbows and looking to like make him bleed, whereas you've got Cuamba looking to maintain the control, not do too much damage, but maintain control and end up winning a 29-28 decision. I think he might give up the first round because of the power of Almeida. It'll be there straight away and he might get clipped early. But I think after the power, after he's thrown all of his power shots, he would have gassed himself out, and then the grappling will happen by Cuamba. I don't think he'll finish him with the grappling. Right, here we have again another fight that just looks stupid on paper. Of course I'm not going to say Trócoli's going to win. I'm going with Aliskerov to win, and this is the key thing. How will he beat Trócoli? This is the hard one. Right, I'm actually going to go with a decision. And the reason I've gone with a decision and I have not gone with a finish is because looking at Trócoli compared to Ilram Askerov will look more like bulky as in wide, but obviously he won't be in cage weight as bulky. Well, to be fair, no, he will be, but Trócoli's going to look bigger in terms of his height, which is going to make people think automatically that he's stronger and all of that stuff, which could be true. But then again, I would say that Ilram Askerov's grappling is way better than Trócoli. And when you look at the fighters he's had to fight, I can't see him winning the fight unless somehow Ilram Aliskerov comes out stupid and throws some like spinning kicks and giving away his back. That is the only way Trócoli can win, because he's got very good jiu-jitsu if he can take your back. But I don't think he can, and that's why I've gone with a decision, because I think he's going to do a very patient approach. I don't think he's going to rush in and blitz him, because if he rushes in, hunting that finish against a guy who's taller than him, if he becomes off balance at any point in that fight and falls over, not like a knockdown, but like loses his balance from forcing a finish, Trócoli can jump onto his back, because although he's tall and he's kind of slow with his punches, the weight of this guy on top of you will not look fair. I'm sorry, it won't be. And I know some middleweights actually are bigger than middleweight, which is obvious. But Antonio Trócoli, for a light heavyweight, he tested positive for nandrolone. So his win did not count. And if a guy was taking that, the strength and the muscle gains he's going to get off that, it was going to make him strong on the ground. And I know it was years ago, but once you build some of those gains, yes, they will go away. The visual gains. But you don't just automatically lose all of the power. You would have got some power that, not power, but some strength that you keep permanent. But the majority of like the stupid levels of like power and strength you would have got from it would have been gone. But he's not a natural athlete anymore. So no matter what we say, not natural. So he's going to be strong on the ground. But I believe Aliskerov, I think he's going to work that body a lot. I think he's going to try and gas him out, because you know that Trócoli's going to be looking for that clinch to put his back up against the cage. And knowing a lot of these big favourites recently, it would not surprise me if Trócoli went out there and got like a very deep submission attempt, but then fails. Like, are you forgetting about... Remember Ulanbekov when he came up against that guy and we were like, who? Who is that guy? And he got dropped within like the first 20 seconds of the round. Things like that can happen. Like, when you have got big favourites, I always tell people, do not go near it, because it's not worth the risk. Aliskerov has everything to lose and Trócoli has everything to gain. Been inactive. He's bigger than him, taller, but Ilram's got that more of like a wider frame. No, not wider frame, but more of like a bulky look compared to Trócoli, who is taller and weighs more, but has got that skinny look to him. Which is why I was saying how Aliskerov has got that wider look and he's going to look stronger than him. Like, not as soy. But for me, Aliskerov has to win it, and I think he will. It's just way better than the Scan Crusher. Right, main event. Perez versus Tatsuro Taira. I'm going with Taira, and I'm thinking, I don't think it's going to be a submission, this one. I know Perez has been submitted before. If you get submitted against Pantoja, I don't blame you. Most guys do. And one against Figueiredo. A lot of pressure. I can see that guillotine coming. But Taira's not one who gets guillotines that type of submission. His submission is more of like a rear naked choke from a dominant position. But I actually am going to go with a decision. I know. You're probably thinking submission, because with Perez, he marches you down. Like, look what he did to Nicolau. That was never expected to happen. A lot of people, I can't speak for everyone, but people like me, I was expecting him to rush him at times, but then get countered, because Nicolau's good at that. But he starts off quite slow, and it didn't pay off there. Taira doesn't start off slow. He just fights in a very composed way. So I think as Perez is rushing him forward, because he's going to get a lot of confidence off that last knockout, he's going to be walking into takedowns, because again, when he throws punches, he sits down on a lot of strikes. And when you do that against a guy who has good takedowns, they will take advantage of it and shoot on him. And Taira's worst performance was probably the one against Edgar Charibs. You know, that guy, the Mexican guy who dropped him in that fight? Although I believe Perez has got the better striking, like those leg kicks can be quite painful. And if he can dead the leg of Taira, shooting on that single will be much harder to do. But because I think Perez, I've mentioned it before, too much pressure to the point where he will walk into these takedown attempts. Taira's not one of those guys like Almabaev who just looks for huge slams and then getting on top of you and then looking to maintain the position. He will immediately try and take the back. So, for example, when he's rushing in, he might not even go for like a flat-out takedown. He might go for one where he goes for a mat return, drags him to the side and looks to get his hooks in, get that body triangle and work from there. That's what I expect him to do. Something like how Pantoja would fight. But obviously not at that level, doing like seatbelts, dragging people down into back mount from standing. I don't expect any of that high level stuff. But I do expect him to be shooting on him and having success with the takedowns, because I know Perez has good takedown defense. But Taira's timings on his entries are very good, which is why, apart from that fight against, what was his name, Vergara, his accuracy is actually quite good. So I expect him to go out there and put on like a wrestling clinic and beat Perez via doing that pretty much. And Perez will be constantly on his back trying to shrimp out and looking to fire off to the head, especially with knees to counter that double leg. But I think because he's smart, Taira, he will mix up. He's young, 24, like Almabaev, but in my opinion, he looks better than Almabaev, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing. So I expect him to mix things up and not just go for a blast double. His timings, his entries will be completely different, and you'll see a completely different fight to what you saw with Almabaev. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.